Okay, so I wanted to show you how to make a library. Well, not exactly a library, but a collection of methods that you can call from within the Python components, and so you don't need to copy and paste them into each component. To do this, I figured that we should make a vector definition for a vector, and we're going to call it limit vec. And I'll show you what it does in a second, and then also, I'll show you a trick with method arguments where you can initialize it, um, and you don't need to fill it in. You don't need to pass in new arguments every time, so it's a useful thing. And then I'll do these two in one video, and then I'll come back and I'll do this with the definition that I created in the first. So let's get started. Um, what I want to make is a vector that limits. I want to make a definition that limits the length of a vector to be between two variables. So I want to have a max and a min, and if I pass in a vector that's too large, I want it to go to the max, and if it's too small, I want it to go to the minimum. So that way we can control the vector length with this method. So import rhinoscriptsyntax as rs def. We're going to call it limit vec, and so we're going to pass in three values: vec, min, and max. And the vector is going to be, we're going to pass in a vector, and then these are just going to be magnitudes, so they're just going to be floats. So let's see. So the vector length, first we need to find out what our vector length is, and to do that we use rs dot vector length, and we pass in a vector, and so we'll pass in the vector that we passed in up here. Okay, so now that we know the length, we're going to say if the vector length is greater than, well, no, let's go less than or equal to the max, and vector length is greater than or equal to the minimum. So if it falls between the two variables that we want, so this basically says if it falls between our minimum and our maximum, then don't do anything. We're just going to return the vector. But if our vector length is greater than our max value, we want to initialize a variable as max. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take this value and make our vector that value. So here it'll be a little bit more clear once I do this. So if v length is greater than max, we want to make this our max value. So if our v length is greater, we want to set len to the max. If it's less than our minimum, we want to set it to the minimum. So this constrains that. And so to change the vector length, first we're going to unitize it. what do I, vector unit, vector unitize. So if you read this down here, it unitizes or normalizes a 3D vector. And so we pass in a vec. And so it's important to realize that you need to make a new vector, because this returns a vector. It doesn't affect this vector. So if we want to affect our vec, we need to set it to what this returns. And we're going to do the same thing here, except we're going to vector scale. And if you read down here, you pass in a vector and the scale. So scale, we pass in this vector, and our scale is our length. So so this vector unit, when we unitize a vector, that sets the vector length to 1, and so if we multiply length times 1, we're going to get length. So this is going to return a vector with length len. Okay, and then we want to return that. Okay, so now that we have a method here, let's try it out. We're going to pass out limit vec. We're going to pass in a vector and a max and a min. And I'm just capitalizing these so so it demonstrates that those are different variables than up here. You could use vec, min, and max, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm doing that. So that's okay. V max min okay, so I already have a point out here. I'm going to set one point, throw it through the vector, and we're going to create a vector display. Vector display. Throw that into there, and then we need to set an anchor. So I'm going to set one point. Oh, that sets the point for this anchor. I needed to set it for this. Okay, so this shows our point, or our vector. And we had the max is 20 and the min is 10. So it's going to be, at minimum, it's going to be 10. Okay, so it's buggy somewhere. Let's open it up and look. Here's what we did wrong, or what I did wrong. I said max and min down here, and so I have min and max up here. Actually, let's switch this one up here. Okay. So you can see that if our vector is in between those two values, it's gonna we're just gonna return it. But if it's underneath, like if it's 9, if the length is 9, it'll return a vector with length 10, so it stays within those two values. And so that brings us to, so this is working. And so now I want to show you the part about method arguments that I find really useful in Python, and that's you can initialize them up here. So you can say max equals 20 and min equals 10. And so if you don't pass in these values down here, when you call it, it will initialize those as yeah, so we're not passing in any max or min, but it's still working, and that's because we initialize these up here. Now there's kind of a general rule to this, is that the arguments that you need every time, you want them to come first, and then the arguments that you need less often, you want them to come last. And that's because it reads it from left to right. So it starts with vec, and then it reads max, and then it reads min. So if we said, right here, the first value is going to map onto the vec, and then if we pass in another value, let's say 40, that's going to map onto the next argument. It's going to map onto our max value, and yet our minimum value is still going to be initialized at 10. So if you pass in this, it overrides this. So let's test that out and see. Yeah, it should go out too. So there's 40 right there. And then and then if you want to change the minimum value as well, you need to do 10. But I guess that's what we have for a minimum value. So if you want to set it to 35, yeah. Okay, so this is working all right, and I hope that's clear how you can initialize it and affect those. So if you have something a variable that remains the same a lot, but you still want to affect it, yeah, just use this. Have it at the end of your argument list, and set equal to whatever variable you want. So I'll take a break, and then I'll come back and explain how to put this inside of a little library.